Two huge matchups this weekend will likely decide who plays in the Big 12 championship game. You have Texas and Kansas State, and then you have Bedlam, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we're discussing the two huge matchups in the Big 12 this weekend. Kansas State, Texas, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma will likely decide who will be playing in the Big 12 championship game a month from now. In the second segment, the keys to beating Kansas State this weekend with Malik Murphy at quarterback. And in the last segment, Texas played an exhibition against St. Edwards a few days ago, and they were trailing at halftime, but they picked it up in the second half to win by 20-plus points ahead of their season opener on Monday. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So yesterday, the college football playoff rankings came out, and Texas came in at number 7, just like they are in the AP poll in the first edition of the college football playoff rankings. And to me, it doesn't change anything. To me, it doesn't really mean anything different than being number 7 in the AP poll. You knew coming into really the U of H game after the bye, after you lost to Oklahoma, that you had no more margin for error, right? If you wanted to make it to the college football playoff this year, if you wanted to ensure you had a chance to be in the Big 12 championship game and win it, the only way to do that was to win out, right? And put the pressure on the committee. And so, that's still the case, right? Regardless of where you're ranked in the AP poll or the college football playoff poll. So control what you can control, go out there and win each week, and it'll take care of itself. It'll be very tough to keep a one-loss Texas team out of the college football playoff with the current resume they have. But that's a little bit down the road. We're talking about the Big 12 championship game right now. And I believe that these two matchups this weekend between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and Kansas State and Texas will go a long way in terms of deciding who will be playing for the Big 12 championship game a month from now. And the Big 12 has kind of been crazy this year, right? There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on. We know that there were some crazy upsets or just losses at the beginning of the season. Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama. Baylor lost to Texas State. Iowa State lost to Ohio. Texas Tech fell off the map, lost to Wyoming, right? And you know, now Brett Yormark's favorite team is under 500, right? So just so much has gone on in the Big 12 this year with Texas and Oklahoma heading to the SEC next year and all of the new teams coming in. It's just been a ton of chaos. And with 4 games left in the season, we should expect to see some more chaos, right? Because there is not a single team in the conference right now without a conference loss, but you have 5 teams with 1 conference loss: Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Kansas State. So there's a very good chance that 2 of those 5 teams will be playing in the Big 12 championship, because for the most part, even though all of these teams don't play each other, so it makes it a little bit more complicated. And I'm the last person to ask about tiebreakers in the Big 12 this year, right? With all of these teams only having 1 conference loss, they somewhat control their own destiny to the Big 12 championship game. And there are some previous matchups that have already been decided between these teams and some matchups that have still yet to be decided. So, of course, Texas lost to Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout, but they play Kansas State this weekend and they play Iowa State later on in the season. Oklahoma has already beaten Iowa State by 30 points earlier in the season, and they beat Texas, but they play Oklahoma State this weekend. And then Kansas State has already lost to Oklahoma State, but they play Iowa State this weekend. So certainly if the matchups this weekend don't solidify it, then those upcoming matchups between these 5 teams will definitely determine who's playing in AT&T Stadium in December. And for the purpose of today's conversation, because I've talked about the 2 huge matchups this weekend, I have not mentioned Iowa State. I don't even know who Iowa State is playing. I think that Iowa State is the least likely team by far to get into the Big 12 championship. I think the other 4 teams are just ahead of them in terms of being a little bit better. I think Iowa State has been holding on to that 1 conference loss for a while. And I think when you look at it, Iowa State still has to play Kansas State and Texas, who are 2 of the 3 best teams in the Big 12. And I do not think that Iowa State can beat Kansas State and Texas on their schedule in their last 4 games. So, like I said, I think 2 of Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas State will make the Big 12 championship and decide who will be the conference champion in 2023. Now, when you look at the Kansas State and Texas game, what works in Texas's favor is that Texas has not lost a home game since TCU last year. So it is now November 2023. Texas has not lost a game in DKR since November 2022, right? So that should bode really well when Kansas State comes to town this weekend. Texas also has not lost to Kansas State since 2017. I know it's a new team every year, new personnel, and new energy, new vibes, all of that. But at some point, it's psychological, right? And Texas has not lost to Kansas State since 2017. So regardless of who's at quarterback for Texas, regardless of who's hurt, who's injured, and regardless of how good Kansas State has looked the last 3 weeks, this is a Texas team that just feels like they have Kansas State's number. And maybe that'll motivate Kansas State a lot coming into this weekend. But I feel like it'll also motivate Texas a lot coming into this weekend, knowing this is a team that even in their worst periods cannot touch the Texas Longhorns. And when you look at it, Kansas State has 2 losses this year to Oklahoma State and Missouri. I would say the best team they've probably played talent-wise maybe would be Missouri, right? But now you're playing Texas, and this is the most talented team by far that Kansas State will play this year. And they even said, I think Chris Kleiman, the head coach, said that this is the most talented Texas team that he can remember going up against. So they certainly have a huge, challenge ahead of them if they want to beat Texas, even with Quinn Ewers out as the starting quarterback. Now, when you look at the remaining Texas schedule, if they get past Kansas State, they have at TCU, who has been a crazy Jekyll and Hyde team. 1 week they're beating teams by 30. The next week they're getting beat by 30. But at this point, with not a lot to play for, and that game being in Texas, I think Texas has somewhat, I wouldn't say that Texas or TCU loses some home field advantage. That's the best way to say that, playing Texas in the state of Texas. Then you play at Iowa State. I just think you're too good to lose to Iowa State, but crazier things have happened. And then you play Texas Tech at home. At that point, if you've won the next 3 games, you should be motivated as hell to beat Texas Tech at home. And plus, they've been talking a lot of junk, so you should be motivated, period. So if Texas beats Kansas State this weekend, I think they win out and put themselves in the Big 12 championship game. Now we look at it from the Kansas State side, because Kansas State has been the best team in the conference the last 3 weeks. They have outscored their opponents 82-3. I'll say that one more time. They have outscored their opponents 82-3 the last 2 games, but both of those have been home games. They have lost 2 games on the road this year to Missouri and to Oklahoma State. So maybe they're not as formidable on the road. We'll find out on Saturday at 11 a.m. Central. Since they have started their 2-quarterback system with Will Howard and Avery Johnson, the true freshman quarterback, they are 3-0, and those quarterbacks have accounted for 12 touchdowns in just 3 games. And I mentioned earlier, their 2 losses this year came on the road. They will be on the road this weekend. Now, if they can find a way to get past Texas, they played really well the last 3 weeks, and they're going against Malik Murphy in his second career start. So obviously anything is possible. They then have Baylor at Kansas. Now, we saw that can be a tough matchup in a rivalry game, especially what happened to Oklahoma last week when they went to Kansas, and then Iowa State. But Kansas State should win all 3 of those games. And I think if they can beat Texas this weekend, then they control their own destiny and likely will win those 3 games to put themselves in the Big 12 championship game. Now, when we look at Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, this is bedlam. I'm not sure if you can just throw everything out the window like you can for Red River, because Oklahoma has still dominated this matchup. But the last time it was in Stillwater, Oklahoma State won this game. So maybe that's something working for them. And really, Oklahoma State has nothing to lose, right? Oklahoma has all the pressure on them. Oklahoma State can go out there and play free. When you look at this Oklahoma team, they're still top 5 in scoring offense, even coming off the loss to Oklahoma. But they have fallen to 23rd in scoring defense. They were top 10 heading into the Red River game. So the last 3 games, that defense has given up a lot more points than they were earlier in the season. I mentioned that Oklahoma lost the last matchup in Stillwater, coming off of a road loss to Kansas. So that certainly plays in Oklahoma State's favor. Now, when you look at the rest of the schedule for Oklahoma, I think this is their one opportunity to lose, but stranger things have happened, right? They play West Virginia at home. Right, West Virginia has played way better football than all of us thought they would this season. At BYU, BYU has been a very formidable team at home this year. I don't think they've lost a home game. So, stranger things have happened. BYU does not look good, but, maybe at home they can pull off the upset. And then TCU at home for Oklahoma. Like I said, TCU has been a Jekyll and Hyde team, but, they have a ton of talent, and maybe they can knock off Oklahoma, playing loose with nothing to lose, while Oklahoma is playing for their entire season in that last game. So I think if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, they'll win out. But, West Virginia, BYU, or TCU might have something to say about that. Then when you talk about Oklahoma State, they are on a 4-game win streak right now against 2 currently ranked opponents. They beat Kansas State and Kansas, right? 2 teams that have looked really good over the last 2 to 3 games. They also had the worst loss in the Big 12 this year by far, losing to South Alabama at home by 26 points. So you would think that a team that lost to South Alabama at home by 26 wouldn't be able to beat Oklahoma, but stranger things have happened. And that offense is averaging 44 points the last 3 weeks under Mike Gundy. So it's certainly been explosive. When you look at the rest of their schedule at UCF, the new Big 12 teams have struggled mightily against the old Big 12 teams. At Houston, Houston just got shut out by Kansas State. And then BYU at home, right? And we've seen how BYU has played on the road. Not great. So Oklahoma State, if they can find a way to get past Oklahoma this weekend, they have a really good chance to win out with the rest of their schedule as well. So Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State all have a really good chance to all but punch their ticket to the Big 12 championship game this weekend, because even though they have a tough matchup this weekend, the 3 remaining games on all 4 of their schedules, they should be favored in to hopefully, I want to say hopefully, they should all be favored in. And if they win the games that they're expected to win, then they will control their own destiny and end up in the Big 12 championship game. But hopefully the results of this weekend's matchups are Texas beating Kansas State and Oklahoma beating Oklahoma State, so we get closer to that rematch in the Big 12 championship game of the Red River Shootout. A quick word from our sponsors, and I'm giving you 5 keys to beating Kansas State with Malik Murphy on Saturday. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the National Football League. We're like halfway through the season and the ad read is just saying kick off the NFL season. So, hey, I love that energy, because before we know it, it'll be February and it'll be over, man. All right. So now we're looking at Kansas State this weekend, and this is the game that at this point is circled on your schedule, right? Like coming in, it was Alabama, but then you beat Alabama. So then it was like, okay, now you circle Oklahoma. You lost to Oklahoma, and then now at that point, you kind of circle every game on your schedule because you can't afford to lose again. But coming into this game with your backup quarterback, the way that Kansas State is playing the last couple of weeks, everything I said in the last segment, the winner of this game likely is one of the 2 participants in the Big 12 championship game. This is now the game that's circled on your schedule. And now at this point, this is the biggest game of the year, because like I said, there's so much riding on this matchup this weekend, and I just don't see a scenario in which Kansas State beats Texas and then slips up against one of the 3 teams remaining on their schedule. Although at Kansas is a rivalry game, a lot of bad blood there, and anything can happen in those type of matchups. Same thing with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State this weekend. So, that's why you play the games, right? Because there's people like me on podcasts that are saying, oh, there's no way Kansas State will lose these last 3 games on their schedule. Oh, there's no way Texas, Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma will lose these last 3 games on their schedule, right? I'm a podcast nerd saying that, but they actually have to go out there and pop the pad. So, anything can happen. When I look at the 5 keys to beating Kansas State this weekend, the first one is it's not enough to win the turnover battle, because you did that last week against BYU. You have to play mistake-free football, right? I think that BYU team just didn't have the athletes to match up against Texas. I think Keaton Slovis has just not been really good this year, and they don't have a passing game to really speak about. Their best chance to beating Texas this past weekend was to go crazy in the run game and rush for like 200 yards, and we knew that wasn't happening, right? Because this Texas run defense is really stout. And so you were able to dominate a game, right, 35-6, in which you turned the ball over 2 times. And really, Xavier Worthy fumbled. He was able to get back on it. So you tried to turn the ball over 3 times, right? You won the turnover battle, but 3-2, in my opinion, really isn't winning the turnover battle, because you never want to turn the ball over twice yourself, right? So even though they had 1 more turnover than you can't be happy about your output giving the ball to the other team twice. Now, BYU wasn't good enough to take advantage of that or beat you with them not even scoring a touchdown in that game. But like I said, Kansas State is averaging 40 points over the last 3 weeks using 2 different quarterbacks, and they've outscored opponents 82-3 the last 2 weeks. You are fooling yourself if you think you can give this Kansas State team extra opportunities on offense and think that you're going to come out of there with the win. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that if you turn the ball over this weekend, you automatically lose, but I don't even want to think about that, all right? This is not a game where you can play with your food, and this is not a game where you can give an explosive offense extra opportunities in the biggest game of your season. So I don't want them to win the turnover battle. Well, I do want them to win the turnover battle this weekend, but I want them to win it handily because I don't want them to turn the ball over at all. I want them to force a couple from the Kansas State side. So I think the key to winning this game is playing mistake-free football, not winning the turnover battle, not turning the ball over at all is the key for Texas to win on Saturday. 2 is I think you have to run for 150 plus yards. We've talked so much about Malik Murphy being a young quarterback, and I thought Steve Sarkisian did a really nice job of coming out and saying, oh, you think we're going to run the ball, 50 times? Here, I'm going to pass the ball a bunch in the first quarter. And at points it worked out, at other points it didn't. But I definitely thought that it made Malik Murphy comfortable. And he kind of settled down as the game went along, right? Really started to settle down in the offense, started to take checkdowns. You could really see things starting to slow down for him, right? And I think that in this game, there's going to be some of that. Obviously, I don't think that you can just run the ball all game and beat Kansas State. So he's going to have those opportunities and execute on those opportunities to throw the ball. But I still think this needs to be a game where Cedric Baxter, Jonathan Brooks, Jaden Blue, and Keelan Robinson, however many of those guys you can get touches, Savion Red and the Wildcat, however much we use it, really carry you to victory. So I think, last week you ran for 150 plus yards. If you can run for 150 plus yards this weekend, then that puts Malik Murphy and keeps Malik Murphy in his comfort zone, right? We don't want Malik Murphy out there trying to win the game. We want Malik Murphy to play within the offense. And the only way for Malik Murphy to play within Sark's offense is if the running backs are creating easy opportunities for him on the outside. And to do that, you have to run for 150 plus yards, make Kansas State defend that run game all night or it's in the day, all game long, right? Make Kansas State defend that run game, make Kansas State bring resources down to defend that run game, and then hopefully Malik Murphy can hit those one-on-one opportunities on the outside enough to outscore Kansas State over the course of 60 minutes. One of your pass catchers needs a dominant performance. So we've seen this year against Alabama and Baylor, JT Sanders had over 100 yards against Oklahoma. Jordan Whittington had over 100 yards against Kansas. Adonai Mitchell had over 100 yards. I'm not sure if Xavier Worthy has had his 100-yard game this season, but he shined in a few of them. But either way, right, you obviously need your running backs to be great this weekend, and I think they need to carry you to victory for the most part. But obviously, you're going to have to throw the ball and be explosive on the outside. And we know Malik Murphy likes to take shots down the field. I think you're going to have to take shots down the field to open up this Kansas State defense a little bit. So whether it's Adonai Mitchell, whether it's Jordan Whittington, whether it's JT Sanders or Xavier Worthy, I think one of those 4 players needs to have a dominant performance on Saturday and be, one of the best players on the field to really open up Sark's offense, allow them to do everything they want to do with Malik Murphy at the helm while being a dominant rush offense as well and leading them to victory. So it's not enough to just run for 150 plus yards and, kind of control the game and control the clock that way. You're going to have to pass the ball. Obviously, you're going to have to be explosive on the outside. I think one of those 4 players needs to have one of their best games of the season for Texas to beat a Kansas State team that's rolling right now. And you have to score touchdowns in the red zone, right? Texas is one of the worst teams, I think 120 out of 133rd right now in the country, which is absolutely crazy because they're 7th in the college football playoff rankings as far as scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They are scoring touchdowns less than half the time they get in their opponent's 20-yard line. I'm out of it at this point, right? I made so many mistakes. They are scoring touchdowns at a 48% clip when they get in the opposing team's 20-yard line. That is not indicative of a team that is ranked 7th in the country and has college football playoff aspirations. I'm not sure if that can be fixed throughout the course of the season, but you could certainly be better at it this week. You cannot beat this Kansas State team getting down there in the red zone and kicking field goals. So you're going to have to find a way. Like I said, I'm not sure who's to blame, but I'm just going to task it to everybody. Steve Sarkisian, he's got to be better at calling plays, be more creative, be a little bit more innovative down there. At this point, we can't just assume that our athletes are better than their athletes and we can get 1 yard because we've seen that, come to fruition. And that was not the case, right? Running backs got to run a little bit harder, right? You're that close to the end zone, push, right? Offensive line, push. The receivers, if you're blocking, push. If you're running routes, get open. And the quarterback, you got to make timely and accurate throws down there to get 7 instead of 3. That'll be the key to winning this game. And I think the defense need to force 3+ sacks and a turnover. In a lot of the games this year, we've got a ton of pressure, but the sack numbers really haven't matched. I think you need to sack either Will Howard and or Avery Johnson at least 3 times and a turnover, right? We've seen, for the most part, when you get a sack on a drive as a defense, that ends that drive, right? Like that vastly increases the chances of that drive ending in a punt, right? If you force a turnover, obviously you get the ball back. So I think if the defense can force 3 sacks, that's 3 drives that likely will end in a punt if you can get 3 sacks and then a turnover, That's now 4 drives that Kansas State does not have an opportunity to score on. Even with a backup quarterback, even with our red zone issues, this is a Texas football team that has scored 30 in all 8 games they have played this year, right? So if you can keep Kansas State from scoring, right? If you can hold Kansas State to 0 points on 4 different drives throughout the game, and you also can run the ball and control the clock, taking shot plays here and there in the passing game, then I don't think Kansas State can score enough points to beat you if they have 4 drives. Right, where they don't score on at all. So I think that's the key for the defense, right? Force 3 sacks, right? Force them to punt on those drives, force a turnover, don't allow them to get points on 4 or more drives. I think Texas scores 30 as they've done in every game this season, and that'll be the key to beating Kansas State in Malik Murphy's second start on Saturday. A quick word from our sponsors, eBay Motors, and then we're getting into the exhibition game between Texas and Rodney Terry's alma mater, St. Edwards, that had Texas fans biting their nails a little bit in the first half. This episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so we are in that perfect time of the year. Baseball is about to end, and hopefully it ends with the team on my hat winning the World Series. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, with us being 1 win away, but I just can't. I just can't help myself, man. I'm so excited. I'm so happy about my Texas Rangers. But anyways, we got hockey on for my people that watch hockey, right? I need to get into it. I need to start supporting the Dallas Stars. If I start watching it, that'll be the team I root for. Just haven't gotten into it yet, but I'm trying to. I love sports, so I think I'll love hockey if I get into it. Then you got basketball. The NBA season just started. A crazy game last night between forever Longhorn Kevin Durant and the Suns. And I know a lot of Spurs fans listen to this. That was a crazy ending to that game. And of course, we're squaring the middle of football season with college football and the NFL. So this is the best time as a sports fan if you watch all 4 of the major sports, right? And like I said, the Texas basketball team will begin their season on Monday, but they had the orange and white game. They played against each other, scrimmaged against each other. And then they had the exhibition against St. Edwards. And, I'll continue to say, I think it's really cool, a really cool moment for St. Edwards being able to play Texas on a stage like this, even though it's in an exhibition game. And, that game means something or somewhat to Rodney Terry because he's an alum there. So it's cool to see him, utilizing that tie between his alma mater and, the school that he's currently coaching at, bringing them together for an exhibition in the Austin area before the real basketball starts. Now, when you look at the first half score, right, because you're assuming, this is St. Edwards, this is Texas, we got so much talent that Texas should just dog walk them from the jump, right? Like from the opening tip, it should just be a mismatch. And that was not the case, right? They had, Texas fans biting their nails, believe it or not, right? Because there's still a lot of Texas basketball fans that want to push this agenda. There were people already on Twitter in an exhibition game saying, damn, this is why we miss Chris Beard, right? So just be prepared for that narrative all season because there's a lot of Texas fans waiting to say, I told you so, and to bring up Chris Beard, who's in Mississippi now for whatever reason. But this is why you play 40 minutes and not 20 minutes. Texas was trailing to St. Edwards 39-32 after the first half, but they ended up beating them. I didn't even write down the final score. Oh, wow. Okay, so they were losing 39-32 after the first half, and then in the second half, we got enough time. Let me look it up. Sorry about that, y'all. I never even wrote down the final score. How y'all doing, right? I'm just killing time so I can pull this up now on my phone. I don't know why I didn't write this down in my notes. My notes are so thorough. I didn't even write down the final score. It was like 6 a.m. when I did it, though. Gosh, now it's not pulling up, of course. Okay, Texas beat up on St. Edwards really bad at the end. The final score was 84-63 after trailing 39-32 in the first half. So they outscored St. Edwards 52-24 in the second half with 63, 40, 89 splits. That's 63% from the field, 40% from three, and then 89% from the free throw line. So they really turned it up in the second half, stopped playing with their food, and played like a team that should beat St. Edwards pretty badly. And in this game, part of the reason why they struggled in the first half and just struggled overall is because they were missing Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou. Caden Shedrick, one of the best defensive players in the country, certainly can be a defensive anchor for the Texas basketball team this year. And then Dylan Dessou was looking like the best player in the NCAA tournament before he went down with that foot injury, and ultimately we lost to Miami. So those are two huge parts of this basketball team, offensively and defensively. And I think playing your first real game against another opponent without them, it showed up, right? And they struggled to get offense in the first half, but then those guards and Dylan Mitchell definitely turned up in the second half and led us to a win. I think three key stats, compared from Texas to St. Edwards, even though this was an exhibition, really decided the game, right? Points in the paint, 46-24. And you did that without the two tallest players on the team, and Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou. So that's a really good sign. Obviously you're going to play tougher competition later on in the season, so you can't take too much from that. But like I said, you also didn't have Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou, so that's somewhat of a wash. Points off turnovers. We know this is a staple of Rodney Terry's basketball team, right? He wants to play, in your face pressure defense. He wants to make it really tough for you to score, and they want to get easy opportunities in the fast break off of those opportunities when they're forcing you into turnovers. 23-10. You'll definitely take that in every game. And then fast break points, like I said, getting those easy opportunities. You don't want to force yourself to be perfect in the half court. 14-2 on fast break points. So the Texas basketball team struggled in the first half, losing to St. Edwards at halftime, but came out and outscored them by looks like 28 points to get a victory. And then when you look at, the three stars of the show, three players who were definitely going to carry you this season, along with Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou, and then all of that great depth that Rodney Terry went out and got in the transfer portal. Tyrese Hunter, right? This is the first time that he's going to be like a leader on this team and one of the main guys. I kind of felt like last year he was kind of sitting behind, in a sense, Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen and Serge Jabari Rice. Like he kind of felt like the fourth option, and he played like the fourth option. This year, he knows he's going to have to be more dynamic and more of a part of the offense for Texas to win. He scored 22 points on 7 of 11 shooting. Max Amos was cold from 3, 2 for 8. From the three-point line, but he still scored 18 on 7 for 16 shooting. So he was 7 for 10 from the 2-point line. The 3-pointers, where he missed 6 of them, is really what brought down his shooting percentage. And then Dylan Mitchell, 14 and 9 on 7 for 10 shooting. If he can give you that for the majority of the season, then this is a different Texas basketball team than they were even last year. And they talked about, obviously, I didn't get to see the game, but they talked about Dylan Mitchell's improved handle and how that'll open up a lot for this offense as well. So it's good to see the Texas basketball team respond to some early adversity that they shouldn't have even been in against St. Edwards, but adversity is adversity nonetheless, and they showed the ability to overcome it. And I'm excited for a really good basketball season to start on Monday. This team certainly has the personnel to make another run in the Big 12 and make another run in the NCAA tournament, and they have the coach and Rodney Terry, the coaching staff, to do it, and the support from the administration and CDC to achieve all of their goals. So very excited for the basketball season, excited for all of the sports around this time. It's the best time of the year if you're a sports fan, and hopefully if you're a Rangers fan, in a few days, we're celebrating their first ever World Series championship. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're getting deeper into the Kansas State coverage for the rest of the week. Hook 'em. Peace.